You're listening to Radio 1. What is dyslexia and who does it affect? Well, Bernadette Cunnane investigates on this edition of the Access series Voiceover.
Dyslexia? I'm not sure. To be quite honest, I'm not sure.
Somebody has trouble reading the letters back to front, or, they can't focus on separate words. They all run together, something like that.
It's a reading disability where usually kids mix up words and that and transfer letters in words and that type of thing.
Dyslexia, that's something to do with the words, something like that. Can't get the words out or something. Can't read a word, something like that.
Well, it's, where the words are jumbled up, it's obviously got to do with spelling. And when a person looks at it written down, they kind of mix up the words, so therefore they don't pronounce the word correctly.
It's when somebody, when they're reading or they're writing, they might spell things wrong or put the words, write them down backwards. They look right to them, but they're wrong.
It's a problem with the brain. It's when they focus on say, a word, when it's focusing on the brain, it's inverted when they see it through the lens. It's not inverted the other way around when it hits the brain. So they see things upside down and the wrong way around.
Well, it's where people have a problem reading and they mix their letters up. A, B becomes BA.
Dyslexia, I haven't a clue.
Haven't a clue and not sure sums up the knowledge of dyslexia held by the majority of the general public. But what exactly is it? I put this question to Anne Hughes, the administrator of the Dyslexic Association of Ireland.
Well, dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty, and basically what it means is that otherwise perfectly intelligent people can have quite a lot of difficulty in learning to read, write and spell properly. Now, dyslexia has nothing whatsoever got to do with a lack of intelligence, with not going to school, with having any difficulty of seeing or hearing. It's mostly a processing difficulty, and it means that though people have been to school, they've had good teaching, they're intelligent, they still do find it very difficult to read, write and spell properly.
And what different types of dyslexia are there?
Well, dyslexia is one of a family of learning difficulties. So dyslexia is really the difficulty with reading. There are others which are difficulty with spelling, difficulty with writing and difficulty with numbers. And they have fairly medical sounding names. There's dyscalculia, which is difficulty with number, dysgraphia, which is difficulty with writing, and dysorthography, which is very a long word for the difficulty with spelling.
And which of those would be the most prevalent now?
Well, the one which is most readily identified always is the difficulty with reading, because that's the one which causes most concern to parents and to teachers, and it's the one which is probably picked up soonest.
And can parents or teachers do anything at an early age to help a child, or does a child have to come here to be assessed?
Certainly, when it comes to identifying learning problems, the earlier it is identified, the better. And that is really one of the difficulties, because very often parents and teachers are not really aware sufficiently early that there is a difficulty. Once a parent or a teacher has come to the conclusion that a child is not learning to read as quickly or as well as they might imagine, it's very important to have professional assessment. Now, we do the assessments here in ACLD, but it's not necessary to actually come to us. The health boards do assessments, and a number of private psychologists around the country will do assessments, but it is very important to have a professional assessment done so that you will know the nature of the problem, the extent of the problem, and that the parent and teacher both will get some guidelines on how to handle the problem.
What are the basic signs and symptoms that parents or teachers should look out for?
Once a child has been at school for maybe 2 or 3 years and has been learning to read for a little while, if that child is not reading at a level that the teacher or the parent would know themselves is about right for that child, particularly if the child appears to be memorising their reading rather than actually decoding it properly. If they tend to have difficulties with words, fairly small words and abstract words like this and that, if they tend to reverse letters, reverse words, sometimes would know a word one day, would not know it another day, and would have difficulty with spelling even simple words, would get the sequence wrong, and as I say, would reverse. One of the things that a lot of people look out for is the reversing of D's and B's, but that doesn't automatically mean a child is dyslexic. But certainly, once a child is over the age of about 8 or 9, reversals aren't very usual. And if a child is still having difficulty at that age, it's well past time to have something done about it.
Adrienne's daughter, Rachel, is dyslexic.
I first discovered Rachel being dyslexic when she was about 6, and she couldn't do her Móra Seán and Rusty, and we put on the wall, we put flashcards, and she would look at them and say, oh, that's Móra Seán and Rusty, but show her them on a book or a page, she just couldn't do it. So I had her assessed with the psychologist, and they suggest that she was dyslexic. And through the years it's been very, very difficult with homework, because a normal 6-7-year-old child's homework should take 20 minutes. In actual fact, Rachel's took an hour and a half. And even still, when the homework has to be done very quickly because the level of concentration isn't there. So what Rachel does, what we did when she was younger, we started with something she liked, and then we went back to something else that she didn't like. And the spellings were every week, 10 spellings, and Rachel would know them in her head, but to write them down on paper, there is no way she could do it. She would get them all wrong, and never getting the star in school and all that. Her teachers in the beginning didn't know very much about it, and when I went in and explained to them, and they were saying, oh yes, and if she is dyslexic, that's, we'll see to her and all, but they really didn't know anything about it. And when she went into secondary school, I went in and I told all the teachers again, and again they tell you, one teacher told me, well, I have never had a dyslexic child before, despite the fact that 1 child in 10 is dyslexic. So she must have had a load of dyslexics, but they didn't. They put them down as slow learners or remedial or whatever way you like to put it. And she said, no, I had never had a dyslexic child. And I was saying, well, go away and do a course on it. And, it's just very hard.
So you didn't really get encouragement from the schools to have her assessed?
I had her assessed myself without encouragement from the school, for the simple reason I knew all along there was something wrong, and I didn't know what it was. But when I went and had her assessed, and I went back to the school and said, look, she is dyslexic, they really didn't know anything about it. And I just said, they said, well, what do we do? And I said, well, I'm having her she's going in to do Saturday workshop, and just leave her alone and I'll take it from there. And that's what we did, and that's what most kids have to do, because maybe a remedial teacher wouldn't know anything about dyslexia. Now, in the last couple of years, Rachel was at dancing classes, and she's very tall, and they learn a song, to do dancers, and the teacher would say, well, you're a tall girl, you go up and write on the board. And she couldn't. And she used to come out to the car to me and say, oh, Mummy, she asked me to write on the board today. So I went in and I said to the teacher, look, she is dyslexic. She cannot write on that board. And the next week again and again, I ended up having to take her out of the classes because she wouldn't go. She was so frightened of her calling her up and saying to her, look, this is what it is. As well as that, I took her, last year she went to acting classes, and they were the best thing I ever did. For the simple reason, I went in and I told the teacher she's dyslexic. And she said, oh, that doesn't matter. And I said, well, you won't be asking her to write on the board. And she said, no, nothing like that. And it has been great. It's great for her confidence, and she makes up little plays, the way, and it's great for her.
I asked Rachel how she coped with being dyslexic.
I go to class on Saturday morning, and from 10:30 to 12:30.
And what kind of things do you learn?
Oh, it's mainly English, like reading and spellings and dictation. So it helps me with everything.
And how long have you been going to these classes?
Since I was about 7.
Have they made a difference to you?
Yeah, they really have. Because I'm able to, without stopping, I'm able to read a whole page, and I'm able to sound words out in my head other than sound them out otherwise.
So it really doesn't make any difference that you're dyslexic?
No, it doesn't.
Crid Smith, you are a tutor with the Dyslexia Association. What does a tutor for children with special difficulties do?
What we try to do is to get to the very basics of the child's problem and to overcome the difficulty that they may have with reading and spelling by making it as simple as possible. What we would try to do, as distinct from what the teacher in the class might do, is to work with the child on an individual basis, trying to track down that child's particular problems and remediate or compensate for them as well as we can.
And what kind of things do you do? Do you play games or do you have exercises or what?
We try to do as many different things as possible. If games can be used, we would use them. We have to try to make the lesson for the child as interesting as possible. It's not always easy to do that. We would use books, flashcards, we would use computer programs if they were available and entertain the child. But we have at all times to try to get down to the basic problem, which is to overcome this child's difficulty in any way we can. Sometimes it's not easy. There are quite a lot of structured programs around that are available to teachers or to tutors, and some of these are very useful indeed. In the end, sometimes it comes down to simply using your own imagination and developing a good relationship with the child whereby you know what they enjoy and try to work on that basis.
Are there different degrees of dyslexia?
There are. As I said before, you can come across very small children, or perhaps not such very small children, who can't even put very small letters together to make small words. You come across older children, or sometimes adults, who can actually read quite fluently, but they can't get what they know down on paper. For people like this, there's a technique of taping. You can get them to tell you what they want to write. You tape it while they're saying it. You play it back. And maybe when they hear themselves speaking quite fluently, you can work from that basis to help them get it down on the paper.
There are 2 special schools for children with dyslexia. I spoke to Anne, whose daughter attends St. Oliver Plunkett's.
It's a special school for dyslexic children. There's only itself and one in Bagot Street, Catherine Macaulay. They take approximately 50 children in total in the school, broken up into about 4 classes. The child has to be assessed by a psychologist, and if discovered that they are dyslexic, then they're interviewed by the school to mainly be sure that the school can do something for them, because there's no point in giving a place to a child that they can't specifically help. The maximum they spend there is 2 years, and they tend to bring the child right back to the beginning of the learning the ABC again, and learning to form the letters, and go at the child's own pace rather than at the class pace that they would have been put at before.
And what would you say is the primary advantage of such a school?
Basically, that it gives the child confidence that it's not something peculiar that's wrong with the child. By the time the child would arrive there, they would usually have lost all self-confidence, that they would feel they are stupid. And it would make them begin to realise they're not stupid. There's just a learning difficulty that they're having.
How did you find out about the school?
When my daughter was assessed, they told me about the 2 schools, special schools there were, and that she did need to go to one, and asked me which one was appropriate to me. And then they made all the arrangements, and I was contacted by the school to go for interview.
And what did Tanya think of St. Oliver Plunkett's?
Brilliant.
Tell me a bit about it. How many kids were there in your class?
14, 15.
Okay, were they boys or girls?
Mainly boys. There was 2 girls in the class, myself and Gillian.
Right, what kind of things did you do in St. Oliver Plunkett's?
Mainly we did sort of games, that is, like the Scrabble. We did maths and the easier English than what had been before.
And how long were you there for?
2 years.
And do you feel it made a difference to you?
Definitely.
In what way?
Low self-confidence to higher self-confidence.
Tanya found help in a special school, but how helpful have the Department of Education been to other dyslexics? I spoke to Laura about the problems she had getting the special exemption.
it was one teacher that actually knew about the exemption that you can get for your exams, and because she pushed it, the school actually looked into it and discovered there was an exemption. So I had to go to the psychologist and get all the tests done, and etc., for my intercert. That was fine. Then 2 years later, for my leaving cert, again I applied for the exemption and it was refused, and we kicked up over it. The school sort of put pressure on them, and eventually, about a week before the leaving, they gave it to me. But the teachers didn't seem to think that it mattered whether I got it or not. Especially my English teacher, who figured that 15% or thereabouts on spelling made no difference really.
Did the department give you an excuse for refusing you the exemption for your leaving cert?
Well, I was told that they didn't recognise dyslexia at all, that it was far too broad, and that people generally, slow people or anybody at all, just use this as an excuse, and they didn't want to recognise it, was what I was told.
You are now in university and you're in third year?
Yeah, third year of applied maths in DCU. Going for, yeah.
How are you coping with that?
That's fine, in that it's a lot of the subjects are maths based, and the university is far more they believe in the fact that it exists, and the subjects like statistics, where there's a lot of reading and writing involved, they're very understanding about it.
Laura is now in university, where books would supposedly play a major role. I asked her how she coped with study over the years.
Well, primary school doesn't really count. Secondary school, subjects like maths, and science, I simply didn't need to study them except coming up to exams, and at that stage I was in such a panic I just sort of read from start at the beginning of the book, exactly the wrong way to study. Homework, bar English, everything seemed to be grand, but English, like learning poetry, was just not on. I just could not remember lines. Even reading it and reading Shakespeare, I in fact didn't read any play or novel for my English. I simply read the notes and asked my friends about it and picked it up in class from what the teachers were telling us to do. I actually haven't read any of the books. I got through the leaving grand. It was only when I was repeating my leaving that actually one of the psychologists in the school actually took an interest in me and what I was doing, and he actually taught me how to study and taught me how to use books by using indexes and glossaries and references, and looking at the graphs and the highlighted words, and just deciding whether you need to read the stuff in the first place. So at the moment there's very little stuff that I would actually read. In college I would take down lecture notes, but most of the time they'd be completely illegible afterwards. I very, very rarely use books in college. I hope my lecturers hear that, but I can't read the books. So I go from lecture notes and from actually doing problems and remembering most of the stuff, but I can't remember stuff accurately, like lines or spellings, but general, like the way things are done or logical ways of doing things I can remember, and therefore formulas I don't remember. But the idea behind it I remember, and work out the formula from the idea behind it. But I don't use books at all.
Laura has obviously managed to cope with her dyslexia in school, but what other problems has it created?
My problem would be with, I would say, coordination, especially, say, sports, anything, tennis, squash, basketball, football, any of those kind of things. And I gave them up at a very young age because of the peer pressure. If you can't kick the ball, then everybody picks on you for losing the goal, and therefore I just gave them all up. The other thing that I have a bit of difficulty with is driving at night. I'm not in that the glare from the lights affects me very much, really blinds me. A lot more apparently than most people. But you can get over that, like just be careful.
John O'Herlihy's story is more typical of people suffering from dyslexia.
Well, the earlier years in school in Loretta, in Crumlin, I was there with my sisters, and when I went in, like, I had the basic ABC, alphabet and that kind of thing, but I had problems with maths. And in first class, when it would come to a stage where they'd ask you to stand up and say 5 times tables or read from a ladybird book or whatever it was, I'd go to do this and I'd do it as best I could, but it would come out as a sort of mumble jumble of words, or things like that. The nuns at the time were more or less saying that I was lazy, that more pressure, and I'd make the grade. And I can remember clearly one day, my sisters were in the same school in higher classes, and I remember a nun saying to me that why couldn't I be like my sister, my older sister, because she was quite good in English. And here was I, struggling through the Ladybird book. And I remember at the time thinking that, and years later thinking that it was very unfair that, to hold that against somebody. But as I went on into primary school and that, it became more clear that I was having difficulties and I wasn't making the grade. But more and more as the years went on, I found that I was sort of last tail end of the class. I can remember actually in primary class being put beside one of the guys who was considered the most stupid fella in the class. And I went home and told my mother that, and she completely went wild. And she said, "This is it. I'm going to do something. I don't care what it is." So she brought me to different psychologists and had me assessed. And eventually, I was discovered I was dyslexic. And at that stage, then things began to improve. Like she started to look around for schools where, at the time, there wasn't that much known about dyslexia. But she started to look around to see if there was a school where I could get the extra help. I'd always be that bit behind, so I'd have to work harder to keep up. But it's always been, I've found that since going through school that it's always been trying to keep up with the rest of the class, being sort of the working harder and harder. And the reports used to come home when I went to vocational school and that were sort of tries very hard, but could do better and that kind of thing. And it was only when I went to vocational school, Emmett Road, at the time, the teachers there made a big difference. There was one teacher we had for English called Phil Herbert, and at the time she took the class of fellas that were very weak at English, and I was among them. And she was a very spirited person, and she encouraged us to, don't let anything get in your way kind of thing, and that, nothing is impossible.
John did a false course after his group cert and went into the electronics industry, working with microchips. He worked with one company for 5 years. During this time, he managed to hide the fact that he was dyslexic. The company folded and John went to work for another electronics company. This time, he told them he was dyslexic.
And I found that was more of a hindrance than a help, in so much as that if a piece of work came with the device back to front on it, I'd be asked, was this your doing? And more 9 out of 10 times, it wouldn't be. It might be in another department that somebody forgot something simple. But I found that kind of thing where even the simplest thing, if the sheet of paper was filled in wrong, somebody was looking to see where I was kind of thing. So I made up my mind after that like in future I wouldn't say it unless I had to in a work situation, because really you can, even being dyslexic, you can work at, like I worked in microchips, and there's a lot of counting in the job and a lot of paperwork and that kind of thing. And it was a struggle, and there were times when I was called into the office and things would wouldn't add up and that kind of thing. But I survived that, so I guess in a sense you can, if you are dyslexic, you can do certain jobs and it doesn't interfere.
Like Laura, reading and writing are not the only areas in which John has problems.
Well, I'll take a very simple thing for start, dancing. Like I always wanted to learn proper ballroom dancing, just for weddings, that kind of thing. And so I went off to learn the proper way a couple of months ago, and everything went fine for the first while. But when it kind of, we say, started doing the quick step, they'd start going slow, quick, slow, and move your right leg out, your left leg back, that kind of thing. And I'd be standing there and I'd be sort of saying which is the right and which is the left. And I'd move out what I thought was my left leg and it'd be my right. I'd be standing on somebody's toe. And then they'd say, the workout would say the moves for a waltz, and they'd say, you know, whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'd be sort of going, or they'd be going clockwise and anti-clockwise for the dance. And I'd be trying to work out which way they're going this time round. Things like that, that I find a problem. The other thing, simple things, somebody stops you in a car and asks you directions. And then you say, right, you go down the road there and you take the first turn to the left. And it's only when they're gone down the road I realise, oh my God, I meant to say, it was right I meant to say, but I just immediately said left, like working out that kind of thing, just the difference between left and right, it's a nightmare. Other things, simple things in everyday life, like some time ago we got a microwave, and in came the microwave cooker and in came the instruction manual, and like there's only my father and myself here, and I took a look at the manual as say, and it was total Chinese, and that was it. So I gave up on that and we went back to boiling the potatoes for a couple of weeks. And sometime after that my sister read me the instruction manual. As she read it, I was able to work out in my mind what it was that they were trying to say on the thing, and then I was able to work the buttons on the microwave. That's what dyslexia is. Like, it's everything you learn, you have to learn from what you hear and what you see around you and that kind of thing, but not from what's on paper.
Craig Smith, now a tutor with the Dyslexia Association, is a former secondary school teacher. I asked her what dyslexia had meant to her during her teaching days.
And like very many people, I was profoundly prejudiced against people who presented badly written, badly spelled, badly presented work. My immediate reaction was, these kids are either dull, or they're stupid, or they're lazy, or they're not well educated.
And how do you feel now?
I feel profoundly ashamed of myself that I should have thought that, and I'm glad that I now know better.
That programme was presented by Bernadette Cunnane, and the production advisor is Bill Meek.